Hello and welcome back, everyone. So what we're going to do is to totally change our game to add a game state. It's important to have game states because we can use it to exit our game and to check which condition our game is in. Basically, we're going to add new functions. We're going to replace our old functions and make a few changes. So the first thing we want to do is to create a text we can actually use to set our game state. So let's go ahead and begin doing that. Again, before I begin, I'll just hit the escape key and save this as a new version. So I'm going to say 06, and let's call this our game underscore state underscore menu, just like that. Oops. So I didn't include the word save. So 06 underscore game underscore state underscore menu. So this is what we're going to use to build our new game state. So first thing we'll do is to create a variable called our game state, and I'll set that to the text menu. And I'll use this to create our menu. We're going to leave init snake and init food. Now in our main game loop, we're going to split this into states. So we're going to have a menu, a play state, and a game over state. And this game state is going to be changing. By default, when the game starts, we're going to be on menu. And when the game starts playing, we're going to actually call the updated states. So first thing I'll do is to just clear out all our functions. They are there, but we're just clearing out the function calls. And let's add a set of new functions we're going to use using if conditions. So first I'm going to say if our game underscore state is the same or is equal to our menu, what we're going to do is to actually call our update menu function. So I'm just going to say then we're going to call update underscore menu, which we are going to create. So if our game state is menu, then we're going to create our update menu. And this is going to handle our menu logic. Basically, restarting the game, quitting the game. This is going to handle that. So we're going to use an else if our game state is equal to play. Then what we're going to do is to set our update game. So we're going to call our update underscore game function, and our update game function will just call our game update loop. So next we're going to check if it's in game over mode. So I'm going to say else if game state is equal to game over. So now if the game is on game over mode, we're going to call our update game over logic, game over function, like that. And we'll go over here and end this and also end this one like that. So we have nothing running on update. If I should save and run this, I'm automatically going to get errors because it does not know what update menu is. We're just calling a function without creating our function. So now let's go ahead and look at our draw functionality here. So here, we're also going to change this to use the menu state to draw our game, right? So we're going to create our menus, and let's again go ahead and clear out this one. I'll leave the clear screen function because that's going to be available, and I'll quickly just save this. The draw function is responsible for drawing and displaying our UI objects. So I'm going to say if game underscore state is equal to menu, then we're going to call our draw menu. And also, so we're going to say our else if our game underscore state is equal to play, Then we're going to be calling our function that is responsible for drawing our play function, right? So basically what we're going to do is just create a new function and then add the body of that function. And to do that, we're going to call a draw underscore game function, right? And this is going to just totally replace our draw content here. So I'll just go over here and now we can see we have our draw game. So we also have our game over state because we need to draw our game over. So I'm just going to say else if our game underscore state is the same as, oops, that's double equal signs, that the text is now game over, then we're going to call our draw game over function. So I'm just going to say draw underscore game over. All right, so let's just end everything here. So let's end our else if block, and also let's end our draw. So let's go ahead and just save this. Now we're going to have new options to update our game. So in our update menu, right, we're going to create a function called update menu. Remember, we have some functions here. We have update menu. So what we're going to do is to call update menu. So over here, we can create our function here, our update menu, and just create our new functions here. So I'm just going to say function update underscore menu. And what this function is going to do is to update our menu. So we're going to say if button press 5, that means we're pressing the X button. Then what do we want to do? We want to start our game. Oh, sorry, we want to set our gameplay to play so that we can start the game. So I'm just going to say game underscore state is going to be set to the word play. Now we're not comparing here. We're using a variable to set what this function actually does. So that's what we're doing. We're setting the game state now. Here where we have double equal signs, we're comparing to see if the game state is play. So here, when our game state is play, we're going to call this update menu function here, right? So play, update game, which is what we have actually here, right? So we're going to start the game, play, and then we're going to just end this if block and also end this section here. So I'll just go ahead and add a few extra spaces so we can tab in and continue working. So I'll just quickly hit Control S. So now we're going to change our draw menu. We'll add functions for our draw menu. Now remember, we already have some functions that are calling draw, but we're actually going to replace those functions. So here, I'm just going to say function, and I'll just say draw underscore menu. So I'm just going to print out our snake game. So I'm just going to use E star, Shift S. I'll just call that snake. Just call that game. Make sure I get my spellings correct. And I'll set that at position 30, 40, and let's use color 11. Let's go ahead and also print our options, the options that allow the user to understand what buttons to use. So print X to start. That's going to be the text. And we'll set that at position, let's say 32, 60, and 7. I've actually checked that beforehand. So let's go ahead and also print our X. So I'm just going to say print O to toggle warp mode, like that. And I'll set this to position 22, 68, and we'll use the color 6. We'll give it a nice gray. So with that, we're going to end our function by using the end keyword, and let's just save this section here. So we're going to also wrap our update function here. So things like handling our input, we're going to wrap that in our update menu. So here, I'm going to create a function. So let's say a function, call that update underscore game. And I'll just add the end here. And what this function is going to do is just handle our play state. That's what our new update function is going to do. So here I'm going to call our handle with E, our input, which is an already existing function we have. And next we're going to check if we're not in the game over state, then we're going to call those functions we're calling initially in our update. So I'm just going to say if not game underscore over. That means if the game is running and it's not in game over state, then what we're going to do is to update. So I'm just going to say update our snake, and we're going to check our collision. So check our food underscore collision. We're also going to check our self. So I'm just going to call check underscore self underscore collision. And we're going to check our bounds. And these are all functions. So if I don't add the parentheses, we're going to get a magic error. And also, can't remember if my collision is single L or double L. We'll just run it like that. When we encounter any error, we'll know there's a problem. So let's run our update underscore flash function. And let's update our mode flash. So update underscore mode underscore flash. Again, if there's any spelling error, that's going to cause problems, and we'll use our end our if block over there. So what we also want to do is to have a function to handle all our draw methods. So I'm going to call our function. I'm going to call that draw game. And what this function is going to do is to draw every object in our game. So I'm just going to say draw underscore snake. And I'm going to call draw underscore food. I'm going to call draw underscore score. I'm going to call draw underscore warp underscore status, like that. So these are all functions that are handling our game's draw mode. So it's also important to basically modularize our game so that we can actually have everything in one place. So we know this is where we are drawing, and for example, our draw menu, we're actually going to be calling those when we run our game. So let's go ahead and work on this properly. So now in our update game over, let's work on that. So function, I'm going to call it update underscore game over, like that. And this is the letter O. If I use the number, it looks very squarey with all edges, but this is O and this is 0. So we use the wrong thing, we're going to get a problem. So over, remember the O in Pico 8 looks like this. This is the proper letter O. If you put 0, you will actually get problems. That actually happened to me. So a lot, where I accidentally set the value to be numerical instead of the text. So basically the game update game over is going to handle restarting and returning the game loop to the menu. So I'm just going to say function. Oh, sorry. I'm going to check for button press X. So that's if BTNP button press X is 5. So then what we want going to do is to restart. So we're going to restart the game if we press the button 5. And to do that, what we're going to do is to now call init, because init is going to be a method that initializes everything. So we're going to set all our changes back to the default state. So I'm going to call init, and I'll set our game state to play. So basically when we restart, we're going to change the game state to play, or else we're going to set the game state back to the menu. So game state is a very powerful string. It's just a text, but we're using that text to determine how the game is running. So let's change our game underscore state to be now set. Let's set it to play. All right. So else, so let's say an else if our button P is not X. So we're using O now. So that's button press 4. Then, so we want to go reset back to the menu. So to reset back to the menu, we're going to set it back to init. Go to reset the game, and then we'll set the game state back to menu like that. And we created our end for this function. So that's super great. So let's create our draw game over. So here we just have, we made our update, our draw menu here. So let's go ahead and create our draw game over. And this will be responsible for drawing our game over state. I believe we have that already. Let's quickly check through. I believe we had created our draw game over. Let me just quickly check it, because we have sections. We don't want to DRY. We don't want to, yeah. So we have our game over section here. So what I'll do is to change this to, here we have X to restart. I'll change this to play again, right? So I'll just call that draw. I'll call it game over like that, draw game over. So we have our game over, and I'll change this to, let's set this to 45, and I'll set this to 45 because we have a new menu option, and I'll leave the color at 8. So we have our score. So I'll set our score to 45 for the X position. And then for the Y position for our score, let's set that to 55. So 55. And then the color is 7. That's, whoa, actually I messed up there. So this is our score and 55 over here. Right. So we have press X to restart, or we'll just say press X to play again, right? So let's drop this down a bit. So let's set this to 40. For our X position, we're moving it slightly to the left. And then for the Y position, I'll set this to 70, and I'll leave this at 6. And we already have a functionality that handles, our menu returning. So press X. So we're going to get rid of this, and I don't want to call init from the game over because we already have our update game over function where we're pressing our button to reset the game. And also we also have our O menu. So I'm just going to say print. I'm just going to say press O, that's Shift O to get the symbol. Let's see, for menu. So we're going to press O for the menu. And for that, let's set this to 50, 80, 5. All right. So that's going to be it for our draw game over. So now our draw food method is going to be okay like that. Another section where we want to tweak is our init snake. So in our init snake function, what we're going to do is to make sure that we're setting everything to reset our warp, our game over mode, and our flash text mode. So let's quickly head over to our init. Okay, just update snake. And this is our handle input. And this is our init snake. Now there are cleaner ways we can actually do this. You can leave this at a double line, but you can use a single line in it. This is what I actually mean. For example, I know I'm having X and Y set to 0, 0, so I can do it like this, right? So we can have direction X, comma, direction Y equals, so, comma, XY0, comma, 0, like that. So it means direction X and direction Y are both 0. The same thing, I can do move timer like this. I can move it up like that. So move timer, comma, move delay is going to be equal to move timer is going to be 0. And then the move delay is going to be 0.5. So you can see how we're saving space. The same thing, we can do it with functions. So if I have just 8, I can just set it to just 8, comma, game over, comma, warp mode. So that's going to be false, false, true. So, but just to avoid any confusion, I'm just going to leave it like this to ensure that we have this running. So when we're colliding in our check collision, we want to ensure that we're changing the game state as well. So let's look for our check collision function. So I'm going to hit Shift Control F, and I'm going to search for function. I'm going to call search for check self underscore collision, like that. And let's try that again. Check underscore self underscore collision. All right, so we have our check self collision, but we're looking for the function. So let's just quickly, I can do function check. All right, good. So we are check, oh, that's check food collision, check self collision. Yeah, so that's why it's good to put them close together. So here in my check self collision, just where I'm checking the body of the snake. So if the head and the segment, is equal to segment dot X here. So if head dot X and head dot Y is equal to segment dot Y, then you can actually see we're calling the game over here. So apart from setting game over to true, we want to set our game state to game over. So anyway, we're calling game over, we're going to set our game state is going to be equal to game over, like that. And we're going to return. And also on our check bounds, that's when we are checking the warping or unwarping behavior. If we have a wall, that means our boundary is true. So we should also call our game state over here. So let's check for our check bounds. So let's hit Control F, search for function check THECK check bounds. So here's our check function check bounds. And in our check bound function, just where we're setting it game over to true, we also should set our game state. So our game underscore state is going to be equal to game over, like that, over there. So we're actually ending the new line over here. So what did we do? We did a lot, actually. We restructured our code. We had, made a new menu system to check for, when our collision is happening. We've updated that, and let's go ahead and save and run. So we have, let's just clear the screen and run this. So it says we have an unclosed function at line 51. So I believe I haven't closed this statement here. So let's use the end keyword here and let's run this. So if we hit X, so we have a runtime error at line 48. So draw warp status. So we haven't created this function here. So our draw warp status is going to handle, the information that shows us if we're warped or not. So let's go ahead and create that. So we haven't created this function. Let's quickly go ahead and do that. Now, I think we actually have our warp. So this is WARP. I believe it's a typo. So let's go ahead and check for our draw warp. So this is it. I actually had it's WARP wrap. So it's WRAP wrap. So draw wrap status like warp. So let's go over here and use the proper spelling, or else we're going to get those errors. So over here we have our function. So on the draw, it's WRAP draw warp status. And good. So we're calling check food collision. And I think the reason why is because I spelled this with a single L. So let me just set this to single L collision. And again, check self collision with a double L self collision. So I use single L for my function names. So if I run this now, we can actually see the game is indeed running. So let's quickly see if our warp status is running. So here, I'll just set this to C. So we have warp mode off. And if I hit a wall, we get game over. I can hit X to play again, which means our game over mode is actually working. So that's how we can set the game state menus to make this quite interesting. Let's see if we collide with ourselves. Yeah, we collided with ourselves. We can actually destroy ourselves. So I also want to set the press X to play again and press O for menu slightly to the left. So this is centered. So we can just go over here. So draw game over, press X to play again. So we can set the X position to let's set this to 30 and C. And let's set this to 30 as well for the X position. Let's run. And let's hit X to play. I'll just toggle warp mode on. So yeah, you can see it's actually a bit centered. I'll set it to, let's set it to say, let's try 20 because I want it to be slightly centered. So let's save and run. I'll press C to toggle warp mode and press X to start. Press C to toggle warp mode off. And when I start moving, yeah, I actually like how it's a bit centered here. So we can press X to restart the game. And if I set the warp mode off, we can hit a wall and this is done. So that's how we can create a nice little menu. And the most powerful thing we did here was just a text called game over. And that text is a text. This text here in our init method, this is what's handling our game state. It's switching and changing our game state. So I know this is a very long one, and I'm really sorry if you were following along and then noticed we had to change everything. That's the joy and the painful part of game development. Sometimes you might create a function and you might realize it's not really structured properly. In our next set of lessons, we're going to be adding more polish, like adding sounds, pickable items, more collectibles for our player to work with. Either way, thank you very much for watching. I'll see you guys in the next tutorial.